When will we stop caving into sectarians, Islamists, and Gaza thugs running our streets? What are the police scared of?
117 arrests, 29 injured officers, 6 major streets locked down, London Underground forced to halt 3 lines. And in just 11 minutes, extremist-leaning migrant groups turned the center of London into a pressure cooker, right at the start of the December shopping season. This wasn't a holiday crowd. This wasn't festive traffic. This was a coordinated show of force, carried out by groups who arrived in Britain through the same broken migration routes Keir Starmer refuses to close. At 5:42 p.m., the first block formed outside Oxford Circus. At 5:49, police lines buckled. At 5:53, the Met declared operational strain. By 6 o'clock sharp, central London was gridlocked under chants, flare smoke, and masked agitators drowning out terrified commuters. And Starmer? Silent, absent, hiding behind community sensitivity, while the very communities he claims to protect are being intimidated and pushed off their own streets. This is the price of soft policing. This is the consequence of a government terrified of offending extremist factions embedded within illegal migration flows. And every Brit watching tonight understands the truth. If you're a British farmer, you get banned from protesting. If you're a British driver, you get fines and cameras. If you're an illegal migrant aligned with Islamist agitators, you get the streets. No other democracy would tolerate this double standard. If you're tired of watching Britain kneel, if you're tired of seeing police back down while the public pays the price, if you believe this country deserves a spine again, then smash the like and subscribe right now, because the more they try to silence this truth, the louder we'll speak. Tonight isn't about December crowds. It's about who really controls Britain's streets.
The groups that hit London tonight were not peaceful marchers, and they were not local activists. Many had arrived through asylum routes that have been abused for years, routes the government still refuses to reform because they fear backlash from religious and political factions. They didn't come to speak. They came to dominate. Witnesses reported coordinated movement, the same hand signals, the same chants, the same masked enforcers pushing crowds forward, and the same pattern we've seen in Leicester, Birmingham, Bradford, and Manchester. A pattern that traces back to migrant-dominated networks now spreading their influence street by street. These weren't random gatherings. They were organized pressure tests, probes to see how far they can push Britain before someone dares to push back. And tonight, they learned something dangerous. Cops stepped back. Politicians shut their mouths. And Starmer's administration did nothing. What unfolded tonight was not a failure of manpower. It was a failure of courage. Officers on the ground weren't unwilling. They were restricted. Multiple sources confirm the same chilling order. Do not escalate with Muslim groups. Avoid confrontation unless lives are at immediate risk. Translated for the public, if it's them, stand down. And that is exactly what London saw. Families pulled away, businesses shut early, elderly people trapped on buses, women reporting harassment, and police holding the line at a distance. Britain isn't just losing control of its streets, it's ceding them. Keir Starmer built his entire leadership on one illusion, that being sensitive to certain communities will keep the peace. Tonight proved the opposite. When the state bends to avoid conflict, it doesn't buy calm. It invites chaos. The migrants causing tonight's eruption came through systems Starmer refuses to tighten. The extremist rhetoric that echoed through London grew under laws Starmer refuses to enforce. And the paralysis of police forces is the direct result of leadership Starmer refuses to provide. Britain isn't being protected. Britain is being placated until it breaks. For months, intelligence analysts inside the Met have quietly raised the same warning. These protests are not spontaneous, they're networked. Tonight proved them right. Footage from multiple streets revealed the same structure repeating itself like clockwork. The same migrant-led organizers. The same religious slogans adapted into political chants. The same men with covered faces directing foot traffic. And the same aggressive blocks forming around police to restrict their movement. These are not community marches. These are coordinated Islamist-influenced mobilizations, drawing their manpower from the same asylum pipelines that have flooded Britain for nearly a decade. And the government knows it. They have the data. They have the intelligence. They have the warnings. But under Keir Starmer, every one of those warnings gets filed under the same label: too sensitive to touch. Britain used to police based on law. Now it polices based on fear. Fear of headlines, fear of backlash, fear of religious groups accusing them of discrimination. That is how we reached this absurd reality. A British farmer protesting taxes, banned, arrested, silenced. A British worker blocking a road to demand fair wages. Counter-terror units on standby, but groups tied to extremist networks, many of them recent arrivals who barely speak English. Full freedom of the streets. No arrests unless violence becomes undeniable. And even then, hesitation. The public sees this double standard. The public feels this double standard. And tonight, the public snapped under it. Because when a nation realizes the law no longer applies equally, trust evaporates faster than order. Tonight wasn't just a failure, it was a decision. Several officers, speaking anonymously, revealed the same internal directive. Avoid confrontation with Muslim groups unless absolutely unavoidable. Prioritize de-escalation over enforcement. Do not risk community tension charges. This is the operational code of a police force that has been politically neutered. They didn't lack bodies, they lacked permission. Permission to hold the line, permission to enforce the law, permission to protect the public without fearing career-ending accusations. When the police fear the people they're supposed to police, when officers hesitate because their leadership prioritizes optics over safety, a country stops being governed, it starts being managed. And Britain tonight is being managed. Carefully, nervously, weakly. Keir Starmer built his government on one message: we will not inflame tensions. But that message has turned into something else. We will not confront extremist behavior if it comes from the wrong groups. Every decision Starmer makes on law enforcement is filtered through one fear. How will this look to the communities we're trying to appease? Not, how will this protect the British public? And so, illegal migration continues unchecked. Extremist rhetoric spreads in marches. Police step back to avoid offending. And Britain becomes weaker with each compromise Starmer makes. He calls it balance. The public calls it cowardice. The fear isn't just in the police, it's in the public. Tonight, British families saw an uncomfortable truth. The government will confront you, but it will not confront them. The law will punish you, but it will tiptoe around them. Your rights can be restricted, but theirs are protected at all costs. Fear divides a country faster than ideology. And tonight, the fear wasn't in the extremists. It was in the people who should have stopped them. This is how a great nation crumbles, not through invasion, but through hesitation. When the unrest erupted, every police command room across London waited for one signal from Whitehall: authorize enforcement. That order never came. Instead, senior officials sent a watered-down directive, one that officers described as panic disguised as guidance. Prioritize non-confrontation. Allow temporary disruption. Avoid escalation with culturally sensitive groups. Culturally sensitive groups. That is the code phrase now used to describe extremist-leaning migrant blocs who march masked, chant in foreign tongues, and openly intimidate British civilians. Whitehall didn't freeze because it lacked capacity. It froze because Keir Starmer's government fears the political cost of restoring order. Multiple insiders from the Home Office leaked the same frustration. Every decision is now filtered through the fear of being accused of Islamophobia. It doesn't matter if the crowd is violent. It doesn't matter if women are shoved, shops vandalized, or buses forced to reverse through panicked traffic. Whitehall's priority is not public safety. It is public perception. Starmer's advisors have become so addicted to community approval metrics that they would rather let extremists overrun London than risk a headline calling them intolerant. Britain is the first country in Europe where police hesitate not because they're outnumbered, but because the government fears a hashtag more than a riot. Tonight's chaos didn't come out of nowhere. Whitehall had 6 separate intelligence assessments warning of radicalized migrant youth networks forming online, coordinated mobilization plans in encrypted group chats, funding traces linking activist groups to overseas religious political organizations, calls for mass disruptions targeting December weekends, explicit incitement from overseas preachers, and multiple red flags showing extremist infiltration inside asylum processing centers. Every one of these reports was marked, requires immediate political review. Starmer reviewed none of them. Officials say the Prime Minister personally rejected harsher measures because they were not in the spirit of community cohesion. Community cohesion. Meanwhile, British shopkeepers are assaulted, officers are injured, and Londoners are told to avoid the area in their own capital. A government that fears confrontation becomes a government that invites confrontation. Under Starmer's watch, illegal migration soared, extremist-aligned protests multiplied, police morale collapsed, and Whitehall became paralyzed by its own political correctness. Even tonight, while London descended into chaos, senior officials were more concerned about preventing community backlash than protecting frontline officers. This is how a state loses authority, not in one dramatic collapse, but in thousands of tiny surrenders. Whitehall can deny it, Starmer can spin it, but the public felt it tonight. Britain is being governed by people terrified of the very groups threatening its stability. If the rioters had been British pensioners, British truckers, or British farmers, the police response would have been instant, overwhelming, uncompromising. But because the violence came from extremist-leaning migrant blocs, Whitehall's instinct was not protect Britain, but protect its political image. And that is the moment a government stops serving its people and starts serving its fear. Tonight wasn't just unrest, it was a revelation. A reminder that Britain's streets no longer belong to the people who built this country, paid its taxes, and upheld its laws, but to extremist-leaning migrant groups that this government refuses to confront. What terrified Britons tonight wasn't the scale of the mob. It was the silence of their own leaders. Whitehall hid, the Met hesitated, and Keir Starmer's government once again chose community sensitivity over national security. The message was unmistakable. If you're a law-abiding Brit, you're on your own. This is the price of appeasement. This is what happens when a government fears offending extremists more than failing its citizens. So before you leave this video, answer one question. Do you still believe this government can protect Britain, or has tonight proven the opposite?